and welcome to Dear Katie, the podcast that amplifies courageous voices and real stories of resilience, healing, and hope after trauma. Inspired by the many letters Katie has received over the last 20 years, each week she interviews survivors, healers, and experts to honor their stories and explore the many paths to healing and hope. Before we begin, please know, many episodes of Dear Katie cover sensitive topics related to sexual violence, trauma, and recovery. Listen with care and take the space you need to take care of yourself. Your well-being is what matters most. Now, let's join Katie and today's guest for a conversation that matters.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Dear Katie podcast. As you all know, I am Katie Koestner, the host of the show, and most of you have been journeying alongside me for quite some time. I myself, as a survivor, began out my activism at age 18, appearing on the cover of Time magazine as the first person to speak out nationally and publicly as the victim of what was then called date rape. And it has been such an amazing exclamation point all over my life. I think with the ability to work on policies and educate students and parents and globally now in Kenya most recently. So I am so pleased. All of you stick with us. Remember to take good self-care throughout the entire episode. Come back, push pause, to go for a walk if you need to. But I am just delighted to introduce Cher Obediah. She is one of our Canadian friends, and I'm going to let her share a little bit more about her background and culture and everything else. So Cher, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for doing the work that you do. I'm so inspired by the work that you do, and it's so important that we spread these seeds of change and have these forums to do that. So again, really grateful to be here. So my name is Cher Obediah. I am a Mohawk and Ojibwe from 6 nations of the Grand River Territory, and I did grow up culturally disconnected and did start to reconnect to my culture in high school. So it's been a journey of reconnection and disconnection and understanding all of that. It really lent to my situation in an intimate partner violence relationship, all of that. Yeah, I can share a bit more about that if you like.
Yeah, that was perfect. Cher, just let's go back for just a second. I don't presume anybody knows geography very well, but can you tell us where in Canada you grew up? A lot of Americans sometimes just say north of the border, and that's as far as we get. They know there's Toronto, they might know British Columbia, but can you give us some pointers of which part of Canada and how far up or down the country?
Yeah, so just 6 nations of the Grand River Territory is near Toronto. So that's where I'm located.
Is it would you say you grew up in Toronto or north or south or like whereabouts? I guess not south, but
so it's more towards I'm west of Toronto. And near Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, that's kind of that area where I'm located, very close to Niagara Falls and the border there.
Okay, now I totally have a picture. I have been to all those places myself, and they're just gorgeous. So did you grow up with a big family? I think you had some siblings, as I recall reading.
Yeah, I'm the youngest of 4, and we did grow up in Brantford. So none of us had a connection to our indigenous culture, but a very loving family. Yeah.
Okay. So did you go to high school? Did you go on and study in graduate school, college? Like what did the whole education process look like for you?
I went to high school, yes, in Brantford, which is actually where I started to meet the other Indigenous children because the reserve only went up to grade 8. So you had to go to the city if you wanted to go to high school. That's where I started to learn and understand. I had been ripped off. Yeah. And I did go into college for theater and then again for journalism. So I became a reporter after that.
Okay, wait. You used the phrase ripped off. So explain more what that means.
When I went to high school, I recognized that the Native kids were doing really, really intricate and cool Indigenous artwork. and I'd not seen it before, but it really spoke to my spirit. And I knew that I didn't have the opportunity to do that. They weren't standing for the national anthem. And back then, that's something that you did. And so I understood that they were raised understanding the difficult relationship between Indigenous peoples and Canada. And I didn't get that either. So I understood that I had been missing some really integral parts of my experience and my culture that they already had. So that's what I mean by ripped off.
That makes a lot of sense, Sharon. Totally, I can see that. I guess maybe before we get to, I would say for our survivors, like what brings you to your microphone, but even just a couple, I think other things that I know our listeners would love to learn more about is with regard to, going back now and maybe embracing more of what you missed out on. Are there some things you could share specifically about, the tribe and all the cultural traditions and anything else that we would never know unless you shared it?
Right. Yeah, I didn't go to what's called a powwow, which is what I would call in one word a celebration. I didn't go to see any of the dances. I wasn't immersed in the culture enough to see that until I joined the Native Club in high school. And then I did see the dancers, and it resonated so deeply with my spirit. And the drum is something that I felt in my blood memory and DNA cell memory. And I didn't get the opportunity to do that or to dance, but I did end up hiring someone when I got older, and I did learn to powwow dance. And it was something that was so deeply fulfilling. And I don't think that people recognize what we've lost.
Yeah, that's so empowering, actually choosing to do that, like to reclaim it literally and, deliberately go and grab what was gone. That says a lot about your personality. I can already tell so much, Cher, like you're one who really wants to know, really wants to experience, it seems like. And you mentioned you went into journalism, but also theater, I think. So how did you choose those paths when you got to college?
Yeah, I started in theater very young. Actually, I was only 10. It was just something that I inherently knew I wanted to do. At the same time, I didn't know or have the experiential wisdom to understand what an ambivert was. So I was very outgoing and wanted to be on stage. But at the same time, if anyone looked at me, I would almost faint. So I was so shy.
Oh gosh!
But I did force them. I think it was Bernie Brown that taught me the word.
How do you do that?
Theater.
Like, look at you on stage. Maybe the bright lights just blur it all out. How does one accomplish this?
Yeah, I was hyper aware of this awkwardness when I was young. Hyper aware that I wanted to be on stage, but that I had an inability to even raise my hand in class because everyone would look at me. So I had that internal struggle and I didn't quite understand it. But if anyone's dealing with shy children, put them in theater, because that was so helpful for me to be able to come out of my shell.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hear
everyone's doing the same crazy things, so you don't feel weird when the whole room is doing it.
Yeah, I think, Cher, since we're getting to know each other, and I try and share just a little bit of my weird life, when I am thrust into this, like Canvas Media came and found me as soon as I wrote a letter to the editor. And I don't know that I knew that ambivert word, but I definitely was the shy one. And there's a TED Talk. It's called Mealy Mouth Little Meat that I gave once because I was so shy. And now, even to this day, it's like I hear what you feel. Like I just tell myself, okay, just get up there, do your thing, and don't look in the mirror the whole time. And it's kind of good because I think looking in the mirror would just floor me. I mean, I can look out at people, and then as long as I don't have to look at myself, I'm okay. It's so weird. But okay, so we have all this college stuff going on. Then you graduate. Now what happens next?
Yeah. First of all, I just want to backtrack to that TED Talk. I did see that.
Oh, yeah.
And that was so powerful. Yeah, thank you for doing that. It made me emotional because, what is your fear? And just go to bat, and that you're going to get pushback, but go anyways, because silence gets you nowhere. Silence solves nothing. It was so powerful. And it's so true. What is your fear? Why are you not speaking? So let's figure that out and nail it down, and then let's move forward together, linked arms. We can all do it. So powerful.
Yeah, I was actually.
So thank you for doing that.
No, let's spend a moment on that, because that's part of the podcast. And I just, I reflect sometimes on the very boisterous voices that we do hear, either through the media or social media specifically, or those who are, I feel like sometimes we hear about in Canada or the US or even around the world protests, very loud, clear voices. But even those loud, clear, outspoken folks sometimes get silenced and not heard. So it's really hard. It's hard to overcome. One step is our own fear of speaking. And then in this cacophony of noise and filters, it's also really hard to be heard. So that's why I love the space of the podcast, because we're here to hear each other, and all of our listeners are, actually paying attention. So honor right back to you, Cher.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's difficult to go out and speak and share, especially in a society that is really sort of socialized to not really hear the truth of what it really is, and unless you've lived it or understand it. So to have this space for survivors is so important. I mean, there's a psychological element to this, and people are out there saying, I would just leave. And I said that. I said that. So it's so powerful to listen to experiential wisdom and people who have been through it, and to go out and share and speak. And I always say I've been getting steeped for this because of my theater background, and then getting into journalism, because I can get out and I can speak and I can share. Now I have such a powerful, profound message from my spectacular derailment, and it just feels really purposeful.
Well, let's go with like how this, before the and then you used the great word derailment. So like what was going on? You were doing all these successful things. You were, finding out about your missing piece of past, and then, the survivorship part. What was going on, and at what age, and give us just, a general understanding of whatever you want to share, so our listeners kind of know more about. I guess I'll say it this way. I'll remind our listeners, I think what's so important is there's no ranking of victimization. There's no like, my story is worse than your story, or mine. I can't, I'm not entitled. There's only let's learn how each and every one of us, what we went through, how it informed us, what happened. I think it's such a glorious, puzzle to me. Each and every guest brings something so unique. So, share, whatever you want about what happened.
Yeah. I like that you just said that we have a compare despair, that maybe I shouldn't be in this space because this didn't happen or that didn't happen. And, I have no business feeling this way or feeling that way when someone else has gone through this or that. And I'm a big fan of counseling. And one of my counselors said, well, how do you feel about that? Well, that's valid. Sadness is sadness regardless of how it came about, and that you have to honor that. And so that helped me a lot, and maybe that is helpful for others as well. So for me, I ended up, like I said, realizing that I was culturally disconnected, and from high school spent a lifetime reconnecting and understanding what is residential school, which is a government assimilation policy by which they took indigenous children and stripped them of their culture. And I'm a product of enfranchisement, which was a government assimilation policy by which indigenous people were allowed to assimilate themselves. But if you did so, you got to keep your children. They wouldn't be stolen and put in these schools. So enfranchisement also came with bribery and money at a time when indigenous peoples had their backs against the walls. So I really, in a profound way, spent a lot of time and understood my indigenous heritage and background. And so when I met my partner, he's also indigenous, And I like to say I was forgiving to a fault because his intergenerational trauma was at the steeper end of things. And so things would happen, there'd be outbursts and trauma, and I would be forgiving of that because I spent so much time reconnecting and trying to understand. And so I would just say, it's okay. I get it. It's so awful what happened. I understand. And that really, yeah, I wasn't trauma informed. That's for sure.
So when did you meet him and how?
Yeah, I met him. So I was in a relationship for like almost 20 years. He was such a lamb, just a really gentle human. And we just got together very young and grew apart. So I was 40 when I met this my partner, the abusive partner, my deeply wounded partner. I sometimes don't like to use the word abusive because of just so deeply wounded, and that's the truth of it. Sometimes I think abusiveness can come with a real anger, and learning to let go of anger is something that has been powerful for me, and instilling the truth of it and the understanding, which is just woundedness. And that was a doorway for me to find forgiveness as well. So it was an online meeting. It was, I met online. We were not in the same city, so it was long distance for a little while. But we managed to find ourselves in the same city. We worked hard to get together, and a really wonderful human being. But aren't they all in the beginning, the whole love bombing stuff?
Yeah, let me just make sure I'm really clear. Cher, so you had around age 20, it sounds like you had a partner you were with for 20 years, but you're talking about a different partner. So the one you were with for 20 years, were y'all married? Were you like, what was that relationship about?
We weren't married, no. Not that we couldn't have been. I just seen a lot of divorces in my family, and I was just like, oh my gosh, maybe it's a curse. We don't need a piece of paper. We're fine. But again, he was such a gentle human being. I would hate to think that anyone thought that the work that I do has anything to do with him at all. Okay. He's so kind.
So what ended the 20-year? That's a long time still. Like, what closed the door around age 40 for that one?
Yeah, there was a lot of different things. Large in part was me, really. A new Cher had sort of come out of this cupboard, and she wasn't going back in. So I was kind of like, we're doing this for Valentine's Day, or I want flowers just because, or now I want to go like have date nights. It was just a lot more than his own personal comfort zones would allow him to go, because he was just him and who he was. And it was really me that had done a lot of changing. There was like a few things that led up to this, to me demanding the way that I want to be treated. And then he was just still who he was. So I was evolving and he wasn't. And I was just like, it's not working. And yeah, we only have one life. So let's go knock it out of the park.
I gave you every chance. I told you what I need. And that makes total sense, Cher. So that, and he, I assume, just accepted the consequences, and you guys split.
I wouldn't say he accepted the consequences, but
did he try to reel you back in?
Yeah. Oh. Well, this was one of the problems. I'm glad that you brought this up, because sometimes people have a problem expressing their emotions and expressing their hurt, and even expressing their deep emotions and feelings. And that was part of the issue as well. And so when we did separate, he was not okay. He was not okay at all for a very long time. But it wasn't, I'm going to go get her back and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I think he was just too awkward with his own emotions and how to be able to approach that. Could it have been fixable? Maybe, but he just wasn't there. He just spiraled instead. So, and I don't have control over anyone else's journey.
Absolutely. Well said. We don't want to be responsible for other people's choices. And you can only suggest, you can, show options, you can be an example, but definitely totally agree. So the new one you meet online around age 40, and then how does that evolve? And you said he was the deeply wounded one, right? And through his own trauma and his past as an indigenous person. Is that close to right? Had
he was also...
Had he been in a relationship prior to?
Yeah, like a bunch. Yeah.
Oh,
which is a red flag, folks. Yeah.
Okay. Like a serial dater, like 10, are we talking 10? Are we talking 50? Was he your age? Was he about 40 as well?
Yeah. He was a little bit younger than me.
Okay.
Yeah. But did have a string where I had one solid relationship that whole time. He had a string. So that's a really important question to ask. And it's also something to investigate the why, and also paying attention to how they respond to that answer. Because often there'll be a lot of blame. Yeah, they'll blame other people and not really take accountability, or they made wrong choices. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you start dating, you start online, and then you meet in person. How did the first date in person go?
Oh, I was floating. So let's remember, I had come from like 20 years. And so it just felt like a lot of butterflies and a lot of, soulmate talk. There was a lot of love bombing, a lot of mirroring. Really sort of becoming that Band-Aid for your own woundedness, becoming that missing puzzle piece so that you feel fulfilled and full, and this is it, and you can't believe your luck. Typical narcissistic behavior. Again, I wasn't aware of any of that. I do teach about that today, though. Won't get caught again. Yeah. So, it was really wonderful in the beginning. And also because he had so much damage, he was on a real deep spiritual path. And I was craving that, really craving that. And that was one of the main draws as well. And he was culturally connected, and I craved that too. So that's the draw.
Gotcha. Okay. So you go along, and then what others? So you're going back. I love how you can go back and you're like, I should have seen. And maybe some of our listeners will be like, oh my gosh. Okay. So when did things start spiraling, or was it like a line you could draw, or did it start small? Was it like, what kinds of things were going on?
Yeah, for sure. Small. And also, there was a really good awareness around where the behavior came from, which I thought was very admirable. So he was able to indicate this is a trigger from this particular event. So it was clear to me he had done some work, that he had that awareness of where it came from. But at the same time, it's not about having the awareness about where it came from. It's about going to the root of your connection and the story that you wrap around your own traumas that is going to create the difference. And again, I didn't know that. So you can have awareness, but there could be 365 things throughout the day that can trigger that one trauma. So it doesn't matter to me if you know where it comes from. It matters to me that this is where it comes from, and this is the work that I've been doing and the self-talk that I've been doing to be able to counter that, so that you can walk with your trauma, that it doesn't pull you backwards, because it doesn't go anywhere. It'll always be there. But you can learn to transcend it and walk with it in a really empowered way, and that's something he wasn't doing. He was just making excuses for it, and I was understanding it.
And when he would get triggered, what were the consequences for you?
I would grab my shoes and run out the door down the street. So I had a pair of shoes at the front door and a pair of shoes at the back door, and also my dog leash. So I had a leash at the front door and the back door, because I found that he was terrible at timeouts. If I had to lock myself in the bathroom, and he would just rip a pen apart and use the middle of the pen and poke it through the door handle hole, and then just come in. If I was in the bedroom, I'd have to pin the door shut to the point where he knocked it off the hinges, and then he would blame me, and I would just get pecked and pecked and pecked. So I would have no choice but to run out the door. He had such a sense of immediacy that he didn't know how to self-soothe or regulate his own emotions, and it would overspill, and I couldn't handle it. So yeah, that's how I dealt with it. I ran out the door. I always took my dog. I always made sure to take my dog. And yeah, I would go for a walk, and then I would know that he would simmer down, and then I could go back. That's how I dealt with it early on.
Oh my gosh. Like an hour walk, a half hour walk, or we're talking like marathons. Like,
sometimes there were marathons. Yeah.
I'm just thinking like your whole mind must be spinning and you're just walking, and that sounds awful. Cher, just awful.
Yeah, well said. The whole spinning, which I now have learned is a term called rumination. So you're going out and you're just ruminating over what just happened, and you're getting more angry, and you're getting more angry, and you're creating cortisol throughout your own chemicals, through your own thoughts, which I didn't know. And I always sort of commend my dog for being my first mindfulness teacher, because I started to watch her. And she would be in the same environment with me. She would feel that energy, but she would go outside and she would shake it off like she just came out of water. She would just shake it off, and she would start sniffing. And so I started to make up stories about the house that we would stop, and she would be sniffing, and I would look at the house, and I would start making up stories about who lives there. What are they watching? Did they build that porch swing? What are their names? And so I just and then my dog would stop at the next house, and I would make up a story. So I credit my dog for being my first mindfulness teacher, because it caused me to stop ruminating and start turning my neighborhood into a story, and it helped me to regulate my nervous system much quicker.
Yeah, that's so brilliant and so astute that you can recognize all that, Cher. But I guess, so I'm always curious, like, how did you finally, like, did it get worse and then you just had to leave? Like, what were some of those tipping points?
It always gets worse. Yeah, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then you feel like it's your fault because they've spent a lifetime manipulating. So a really big turning point was when I called 911. I called the police, and I was just getting tormented for like 2 days straight. And sometimes it would be a few hours, sometimes it would be a day. But if it went on for 2 days, it would be way more than my own nervous system could handle. And I did call 911, but because he's had such a diverse background, and I always say he's a scholar of survival because he learned how to navigate the system. He was raised in the system, so he knew what to say and what to do. When the police arrived, he just reverted into that person, and I got arrested. And it was like one of the most traumatic and vulnerable times, and they wouldn't listen to me. I wasn't allowed to share my side at all because there's something called mandatory arrest. So that was super, super sad and frustrating. And we had a lot of discussions about that afterwards. And he still was saying that I attacked him. It was just like, how delusional are you? So I think sometimes that when it comes to narcissism, they just convince themselves of these stories so profoundly that they actually believe it. And I think that's just their own cognitive dissonance and a way to be able to move through it themselves. But he knows what he did. He knows what he's guilty of. And yeah, that was really, really a big turning point after that. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I just knew and understood that I was having this moment of, why do I keep going back home? I have a 100% chance this is going to happen again. Why am I going back? And I couldn't understand it. I felt crazy. So I started to study psychology and neurology. And it really helped when I started to get that education and understand it. It was easier to sort of like step away. But I mean, it's not an event. It's a process. And I always say that as well. It took a long time. It was a slow Band-Aid. Yeah.
And when you say you started studying, like, did you take online courses, or you were like reading on your own? Like, how were you learning all this?
Yeah. I ended up doing a deep dive into the self-help section in the bookstores and online for sure. And yeah, there's a ton on YouTube. You can go watch a university lecture on psychology and take your own notes if you want. So I started to do things like that. And I started to understand the different parts of the brain, because he would apologize and then do it again. And I couldn't understand that. But you can apologize from the prefrontal cortex, but then get triggered in the midbrain. And I didn't know that he was operating from two different parts of the brain. And so when I understood that, it was like, oh, that's interesting. So that was helpful as well. So you start to understand these things. It just made it easier for me. But yeah, that's what I did. Deep dive into, I like to say, I fell in love with the evolution of myself instead of with him.
Yeah, that's lovely. Well put. So, would you characterize, just again for helping our listeners, like it sounds like he was threatening, was he also and mentally abusing you? Was there also physical altercations and sexual abuse? Like if you know, was it all the things?
Yeah. Financial abuse for sure. Yeah, he was crafty. He didn't really have much when we met, so it was a real almost like during colonization, when colonizers sort of like rode the back of the indigenous peoples and then sort of create this country off of duplicity and trickery. And it's kind of like how I felt on a smaller scale. It's like he just rode my back and, sort of siphoned everything that I had. And it's just like, if I was to sum it up, I would say he was in the ditch and I put my hand out hard and I pulled him out. And then when I got him up onto the road, he jumped in his brand new car and drove off and shoved me in the ditch. If I'm to like be honest and word it really in a succinct way. And so when I was in that ditch, my self-talk was horrible. I was really hard on myself. Like, who does this? Who derails their whole life like that? I just felt really stupid and really ashamed. And so, but there's a lot of different ways you can rise from the bottom. And so there's that.
So it sounds like, and what time frame was this? Years or months? Just so we have a little more of that.
Yep.
Was it
8? We're talking 8 years. Of like on and off, not like a solid. Yeah, just an entanglement of 8 years before all communication was cut off, which was still because he was using money as well. And so he was offering money and I didn't respond to that email. And that felt really powerful. To this day, I'm like, oh, I still love that I did that. Because that's one of the things that keeps people trapped is financial situations. But yeah, I worked really hard to be able to I do not want to talk to him. I do not want to be under his thumb. I want to put my hands firmly on the wheel. And if I'm going to do that, then I need some time to sort of cross over. And I gave myself a 2-year marker. And I started hitting those marks one by one. And during that time, I was polite and I was kind. And I didn't want to sort of knock anything off track, even though I would close doors after talking to him, and then I would be like secretly giving him the finger, like double fisting, because I'd be so angry. But I would be kind to him, but that I had to play the game. But I did want us to be friends in the beginning. But as we got further apart, that changed. So yeah, there was a lot of different techniques that I had to use to be able to get through that. Again, it's no overnighter, and everyone's is different.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, and that whole 8 years, were you living in the same place, or would you leave and go somewhere else? Or did you have another place to stay?
Up until near the end. And then we were in the same place. Yes. Mm-hmm. In the same home. But then, after the whole 911 call and calling the police and then him getting me arrested, he did get his own apartment after that. But even then, we were like, still stay at his apartment, come and stay at mine, or go stay. There was like a whole back and forth. And then I also had to get roommates at that time because it was, he had control of all the money. And so it was sad to me that he now had all the money, that he took control of the finances, that he had his privacy, that he had this beautiful place that he could go to, and that I was struggling now with people that I loved, but my home was, I didn't have the bandwidth to deal with it at that time. I couldn't even cry. I got in my car to cry. So yeah, there was a lot of resentments, but they say that most resentments can be traced back to your own lack of boundaries. And that's a fact.
So, Cher, I guess, in the last, 5 to 10 minutes that we have, so how did you finally, you said you put down the 2-year marker, and then when you finally just said, we're all done, how did that go down? And then, I'd love to hear more about healing and other things. It sounds like you've tried so many. So how did you finally this is done? And then, what have you been doing lately to do good self-care and all those wonderful things?
I had engaged in that while we were still together. So one of the things that I did immediately was clean up my social media. I didn't want any negativity. If one person was complaining, I would silence, not unfriend, but just sort of I can't see that right now. I know that you have your own stuff, but this is so heavy for me. I only want positivity. I'm going to take control. And then this post for cultivating inner peace came up, and it was at a Buddhism temple. And I was like, yes, please. So I did do a Buddhism temple for a year and learned how to meditate and cultivate peace. And I learned how to just be very present and in the moment. And I also went to counseling, and I also did Reiki. I did conscious uncoupling because I wanted us to remain friends. That was important to me because he was still he could be so kind. But in the end, was any of it ever real? Because it really is about intermittent reinforcement. As long as I'm kind to you, I can continue to siphon your energy. So the kindness, it didn't feel real in the end. So yeah, I did conscious uncoupling. I did a lot of writing. I wrote a book, Shame to Shine. The Wreckage and Rise from Domestic Violence is really just a compilation of what I call my diary and poetry. I did narrative therapy and didn't even know it. So I wrote poetry just because I wasn't able to express to him my emotions. He took it as criticism. So I just wrote and wrote and wrote. And as I went on my healing journey, my writing shifted and changed. And I just thought, oh, this is so powerful. So I wanted to be able to put it in a book, which is why it's From Shame to Shine. So the crumpled up rose to this really beautiful blooming flower that we all have the ability to be. So writing was very powerful for me. Online writing courses, connecting to your soul, that kind of stuff. So yeah, Reiki, energy work. Yeah, I did the deep dive for sure. Reading, books, you name it.
Wow, it sounds like you did everything, Cher. Did you ever go back and revisit theater or any of the things you did when you were younger?
Oh, I have had a few little tiny things sort of pop up in my life in terms of theater. So I got into film. So I started creating some short films. And then my film mentor was doing some short films and then asked me to take a little bit part in there. And so it was really fun to sort of get dressed up and sort of become someone else again. And yeah, I take a great joy in that. But I'm a bigger advocate of documentary film, not so much theater and acting, but real stories. How can this story alter and change the trajectory of, our tomorrows? Because I want to be on the right side of history. How can I leave a solid footprint of change through my own advocacy and through my own pain and turning pain into purpose? Yeah.
Nice, Cher. That sounds really positive. As you've been talking, it's so clear how angry you were going through all of that. It was just right there the whole time. And I'm so amazed at how you've conquered all of that. And the blame part, it sounds like, it's doing the work, and you've been doing the work. And I feel like you're taking your whole life into your full grasp and deciding exactly how you want to lead it. So that's wonderful. I think the last thing, I know we'll put the book in show notes, but what about just two things? Like if you have those, dark moments, the hard times, what pulls you out? What do you do to
learning? Yeah. I learned that my thoughts are creating my reality. And so if I was able to change the way that I was thinking about something, that I could alter the way that I was feeling about it, that it wasn't going away, but I can in fact change the way that I think about it. And that's why I started to study neurology, so that if we're really feeding something negative, then it's a really solid path towards darkness. But if you're feeding something positive or finding a new light around it, that the old neurology starts to grow weeds over it and it starts to sort of let go. You can watch this on YouTube in real time. They let go. You're such a miracle. You're divine miracles. So yeah. And the other thing was poetry and writing.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh my gosh. Well, Cher, I feel like we've gone right through, I'm starting at the Niagara Falls and like building your whole life story. It's such a really powerful, series of I feel like you're so multi-dimensional that you're not afraid. It's like that ambivert part of you is like the perfect blend that allows you to, go seek out and learn and absorb and then take the best and use it. So fantastic. Just really powerful. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with all of us. And I know we can find books where they are sold and learn, even more. And when people read the book, what else might they learn about in reading it?
Oh, there's a lot of different things that I did that were helpful for me. That's like part of my work today, sharing my story, being an advocate, but more importantly, helping people to understand that they have the tools within to transform their own trauma, to be able to transcend it. And so I write about those things. The first chapter's in the cycle. The second chapter is like when I'm starting to understand trauma bonds. And then the third thing is enlightenment and empowerment. So there's a lot of things in there that I hope people gravitate towards. Yoga. I wrote about yoga, which is connection to self. And that's not something I would have tried before either. And that's all in there. And yeah, I just really want people to understand that you're not broken, that you're not unlovable or unworthy, that you're a divine miracle, that you have a fortitude that you weren't socialized to recognize, that we all have that within us. It's there. You just got to dust it off because you were born with it and it just gets socialized out of you. And so getting reconnected with that is something that it's why I call it my beautiful disaster today, because would I have held a mirror up to myself? Would have I dusted all that off and reconnected so profoundly to myself if I didn't do that work? And today I float. I've never walked so lightly on Mother Earth as I do today. So I'm really grateful for the whole mess.
That is such good advice. Grateful for the mess, and then onward and upward. So again, Cher, thank you so much for spending time with us. And for all of our listeners, invite you to journal along, poetry along, pick up some of the ideas from Cher's journey. Certainly her book sounds like it's a plethora of ideas. So until we meet again on the next episode, take awesome, wonderful care of yourself. And I like some of the ideas that Cher gave us is like set those goals, set those limits, and stick to them. So that will help all of us. Take care until the next episode.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Dear Katie. These conversations are never easy, but they're always necessary, and we're so grateful you chose to share this space with us. If something in today's episode stirred something within you, please give yourself what you need. Whether that's rest, support, or just a deep breath, you're not alone. To hear more stories, resources, and survivor-centered conversations, be sure to subscribe and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. We want to hear from you, so please leave us a review and share your feedback. Your thoughts help us create episodes that resonate with listeners. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.